here is Mark Lamont Hill. He has a show that he calls, what is it, Black News Tonight or something like that? BNC, I forget what the exact word was, but he had Rufo on, Christopher Rufo. We talked about him. He's kind of been he's been very good when it comes to speaking out against critical race theory. And of course, all of this should be framed in the sense that it's anti-white. That's the main issue, in the sense of exposing the critical race theory for being hateful and stuff like that, because it's teaching young white kids especially to hate themselves, right? But anyway, so he was interviewed by Mark Lamont about this, and one of the questions he had was, what do you like about being white? So I've actually not heard the whole clip before, so let's listen in and see what he says. The main guy I saw the tweet from here said, Rufo handled this the way he needed to. As the guy leading the anti-critical race theory movement, he played it smart. But if he'd been asking me the questions, I wouldn't hesitate in answering Western civilization. Anyway, let's see what Rufo said here. If he kind of cocked or not, we'll see. I'm listening to this first for the first time.
And if I were to say to you right now, Christopher, what do you like about being white? What would you say?
I don't know. Again, it's such an amorphous term. It's like a census term or a
but can you do me a favor? Indulge me for one. We're running out of time. Indulge me for a minute. I understand you see it as all these things, but you surely recognize that the world sees you as white. You know the world reads you as white. And if you were to ask me some things I like about being black, I could talk about cultural norms. I could talk about tradition. I could talk about the kind of commonalities I feel around the diaspora. If I were to ask you particularly if you're saying whiteness is a thing that is being constructed as negative and shouldn't be, name something positive that you like about being white.
Well, sure. I'll answer with a thing.
Well, bringing the world, all the advances that we've made, civilization, right? There's so many things you could say. Let's see where he goes with this here, right? But it's at least then maybe someone like Mark Lamont is willing to. I don't want to read too much into this here, but I feel that someone like Rufo is kind of like let's just not talk about that and let's just kind of go back. I'm all for treating people equally, don't get me wrong, but some of these kind of anti-CRT people, critical race theory people are like, no, the race doesn't exist, we shouldn't talk about it kind of thing, while someone like Mark Lamont is probably very eager to talk about it. He does it, of course, because he wants to blame white people for everything, and he's very anti-white. But anyway, interesting dynamic. Let's see what else he says here.
There's a lot of documents that are floating around public schools that say things like timeliness, showing up on time, is a white supremacist value or a white dominant value. Things like rationality, things like the Enlightenment, things like objectivity. And these are very strange things to be ascribed to a racial identity. My view is that these are actually should be ascribed to every individual human being. Every individual human being, regardless of whatever racial category we impose on them.
But Christopher, that doesn't answer.
But they don't want. It seems like they don't want it. Then that's one of the reasons why it's being dismissed and attacked as white supremacy, right? Because in reality, many of those values come from Western civilization, Westernkind, right? The European mind and how we like to do things. So ironically, maybe they're right. If they don't want it, that I'm perfectly fine. If they want none of this. But if these groups are in our countries, which are founded by and of and from these ideals, shouldn't they apply to them as well? You got to have a separate society that lives like, we don't care about clocks here. We don't care about that. All that shit is white supremacy. We don't be on time. We're not, we don't think about, we don't like working hard. We like other people taking care of us and giving us shit, though.
To the question, no. You're telling me you're making straw men about things that are ascribed to whiteness that you think are wrongfully ascribed to whiteness. I'm saying if whiteness isn't a negative thing, and there's something that that whiteness actually shouldn't be constructed as all negative, name something positive that you believe is positive about being white.
Well, but he said some of those things, the way that we've organized society, essentially, right? That's what he's talking about. He thinks being on time, working hard, and doing things that actually makes us a successful society, that's a good thing. High trust, how about that? Orderliness or whatever. Remember, I think was it the African American Museum? What is it called again? I forget the acronym stands for, and we've showed the image of that many times. That's what he's referring to. This crazy list of shit that they have of like all the things that are wrong, which they attribute to whiteness. Here's the document as a reminder right at the end here. This has been going around like crazy, right? But let me zoom in here real quick. You guys have seen this, right? White culture. This is by a Katz, right? Remember this? Aspects and assumptions of whiteness. and white culture in the United States. Individualism, family structure. That's right. All the commie stuff was like family. That's a white thing. That's bad. It takes a village. That's what they want, right? History based on Northern European immigrants' experiences. Protestant work ethic, religion, status, power, and authority. Aesthetics, time, right? You see this? Holidays, justice is a white thing, I guess, based on English common law. Yeah, that's horrific. Yeah, just those values, I guess, that ended slavery. How about that? Absolutely despicable. I can't believe it. Competition, communication. Anyway, yeah, it's by Judith H. Katz, 1990s. Is that when that was done? Holy shit. Yeah, so you get it. This is what he's talking about here, that these things are ascribed to white culture, which I think is actually correct. I think it is, right? I think Rufo is arguing that it's not, but I think it is. I think Mark is correct in the sense here. They just see it as negative things, while people who are in the West, of the West, are grown up by these ideals because it's we who made them. Us, European man, came up with many of these concepts. Others had them, sure. But in many regards, they see it as wrong because like all these colonialists brought these ideas to us. We didn't live this way. Anyway, rest of the clip here.
Again, I don't buy into the framework that the world can be reduced into these metaphysical categories, whiteness and blackness. I think that's wrong.
But they're not metaphysical, or in that sense, right? I mean, they're based on something. They're based on genetics, right? It's interesting because a Mark Lamont Hill is willing to recognize that, while a Christopher Rufo, it sounds like, is not, unless he knows about it, but tactically takes a road which he believes that it's less likely that he will be called a racist, right? That's basically what I'm seeing happening here, which of course is silly, because you don't have to bow down to their way of looking at things. They don't set the rules. We do. They don't drive the narrative. They can call us racist all they want. The trick is not to give a shit, and it doesn't matter. We're standing up for ourselves and our own, and we look out for ourselves first. Doesn't mean we hate, want to kill, or murder, or be violent towards anybody, but we are looking out for ourselves first, and that's what every racial group does, and that's okay. And of course, you can find with a DNA test, you can find what race you belong to, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. So I guess Christopher is walking around on eggshells here. Don't get me wrong, he does great work on exposing all the CRT bullshit and all the anti-white stuff, and he should continue with that. But it's nothing wrong with saying that good traits that we have developed, they came from us, and we're not metaphysical. We're an actual group, right?
I think we should look at people as individuals. I think we should celebrate different people's accomplishments. And again, I think the idea, you mentioned Ignatieff. Ignatieff says the goal is to, quote, abolish the white race. In any other context, this would be...
So technically, he said abolish white... I've thought about this lately, but Noel Ignatieff, we've played the clip many times, it's a language thing, right? They're changing the definitions and the labels and the language. So not everyone does that, though. Some just say, yes, white people are the problem. We need to eradicate them. But many of them, these guys he's talking about, are fleeing to the term whiteness. Someone like Barbara Specter tweeted out, like, we need to end white people and stuff like that. So they just go full on out. But someone like Noel Ignatieff said, no. It's not about that. It's about whiteness, you see. It's not. But he also says you can't have whiteness without white people, I believe in that clip too, right? So, but it's a step in between, that if the charge comes and says, this is incitement, you're encouraging an extermination of a race or something like that, they say, whoa, slow down. No, I'm just talking about whiteness. And that's why, like, the whiteness that non-white people have in their head has to be removed, kind of thing. So it's one of those definitions things. It's like in the same way that they talk about gender as opposed to sex, right? They come up with a new term, a new idea, and then they're attacking that. We know what it means. We know what they want, of course, but it's a way kind of out of it. So just as a technicality, though, they're more sophisticated, some of them, than that, and they just say, no, we're just attacking a concept. We're not attacking white people. I saw it the other day, too. It's like, well, whiteness doesn't really exist, to try to say. Okay, well, then it's a definition thing. I'm perfectly fine calling it European, Western, whatever you want. We're at the end of the day, we're talking about the same thing, as far as I'm concerned, but they are trying to say that it's a definition issue, right, which is bullshit.
Interpreted as a near genocidal slur. I don't buy into it. The reason I'm not going to answer your question is I reject that categorization. I think of myself as an individual human being with my own capabilities, and I would hope that we could both judge each other as individuals. and come to common values on that basis.
Fair enough. I would argue, though, that the ability to say, I don't see race, I don't...
that's racist in and of itself, right? So I get what Rufo is doing here. I get what he's doing, but this is what it's all about right here, right? We went through this in the latest Weekend Warrior show, so check out that. It was a pretty important part, I think, of the show from The Economist, a Rothschild publication. White Americans are beginning to realize that they too belong to a race. I don't necessarily like the term white, and it's being used by these kind of nefarious, if you will, source. I don't care. I mean, I don't mind it. I get. We all get what they mean, or what a white person is. They could be, even if there's a tiny little fraction that's in the gray zone. Oh, what is white anyway? Most people can see what a white person is when they look at them. It's bullshit. Just because there's a small slice of something that falls in between doesn't negate the whole black and white. Like, if you have something on the gray scale, that doesn't mean that black and white doesn't exist, literally, like the colors, right? So that's kind of the argument they're trying to make. I prefer European. That's fine. We're European people, Western people. It doesn't matter, right? But we belong to race. But this is actually a very interesting article here. Now, they're, of course, talking about it. How do we make sure that these white people, when they begin to identify with their race, with the ethnic group that they belong to, how do we make sure that they're a submissive one, right? An anti-racist one. In other words, an anti-white one, that they turn against themselves and they examine themselves from the point of view of race. And we want them kind of to notice race and to pay attention to it now. Rufo is kind of 10 years too late, right? Remember, there was a time when even the left said, no, race doesn't exist. You shouldn't talk about that. That's racist. They've flipped on that now. Now they want everybody to notice. But white people technically cannot have a common identity. So I'm okay calling you European instead of like saying whiteness, but we all know what they mean when they say it, right? So anyway, very interesting article. Check out the Weekend Warrior show. We went through this in more detail there. And there's kind of a awakening. And essentially, you can kind of equate, frankly, and they do it in the article too, when it comes to America, not just Europe too, because white people live in Europe too, right? So they live in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, all kinds of manners of nations that we've created. But they're trying to basically kind of equate that it's about 70 million people, right? So basically, it's the Trump voting group, essentially. Not entirely, but they're kind of recognizing that in the article. And that, of course, is also why they've drummed this narrative. What do we do about the 75 million people that voted for Trump? Because they belong in the category that refuse to bow down to us and to our way of dealing with these pesky white people. Anyway, to give a little more props to Rufo here too, though, because he does do good work. I'm not trying to just completely shit on the guy, but he had some scoop out of Lockheed Martin, the nation's largest defense contractor, sent key executives a 3-day white male re-education camp in order to deconstruct their white male culture and atone for their white male privilege. I've obtained internal documents that will shock you, and he has some of that up on his Twitter here, so check that out too. We don't have time right at the end here, but very interesting. Lockheed Martin's White Men's Caucus. Holy shit, can you imagine these space programs, right? When they're going to begin and they're going to replace all these white men, and white men are the problem and all this shit. Like, look at this. Holy crap. All right, we'll go through this in more detail at another time. Everywhere, every institution all over is plagued by this just total insanity, right?